echoes of the past, a fractured psyche, and visions of a tragic incident. But can you really trust what your eyes can see? Hello viewers, my name is Tericho and welcome to my channel where I explore, explain and expand upon the darkest worlds in video games. Today I'm looking at Chasing Static, a recently released horror game inspired by the PlayStation 1 era of video games. As usual, I'm going to be spoiling the story here, so if you haven't played the game yet and you want to avoid spoilers, this is your one and only warning. With that said, let's move on to the video. Chasing Static is a game about loss, hardship, grief, but it also explores themes of science. How much are you willing to do to uncover the truth, and what cost might it have? It explores our perception, and it hints that what we can see and what we perceive might not be all that there is. While the game does have some tragic incidents, we don't fully know what's real and what isn't. But this game is also a game about reconciliation, about coming to terms with your past, about meeting your fears head on, and about moving on with your life, knowing that things happen that you can't control. While the game is fairly short, it asks many interesting questions, although it does ask more than it answers. What's more, Chasing Static has many mysteries, and one final mystery wrapped up in a secret ending that most players will miss. But to understand all of this, we need to move on to the plot. Our playable protagonist in Chasing Static is Chris. The game begins at the funeral of Chris's father. Chris and his father had become estranged. They hadn't seen each other for many years, and it's clear that the two didn't see eye to eye. At the funeral, Evelyn mentions that Chris's father didn't have many friends at the end, to which Chris replies he never did. At the end of the funeral, Chris is given his father's journal, which prompts him to return to his childhood town. As Chris is driving to Wales, he begins to read his father's journal. The journal documents his father's work. He was a researcher, and he put his life's work before everything else. While it's not entirely clear what this work is, Chris's father gives us hints to this. He explains that he hoped to prove that we are more than ourselves and that our perception of reality is merely a veil over our own ideals and hunger to understand this world. He also explains he has many regrets, but the institute where he based his work was not one of them. Chris arrives at the town of HEARTH in Wales. There he comes across the Last Stop Cafe, which seems to be still open. Upon entering, Chris meets Anera.
Christ alive! You almost gave me a heart attack.
The two have a conversation together. Chris reveals that he used to be from around here, but a very long time ago. Chris learns that she's called Anera, which he incorrectly guesses means winter. Anera is impressed as it actually translates to snow, which he says was close, and that most English people don't know any Welsh. Anera offers Chris some coffee, and explains that he missed his turning around half an hour back, which she would be happy to give him directions if he offers her a lift. Chris agrees, and the two continue their conversation. This conversation is cut short when the power goes out. Anera asks Chris if he wouldn't mind going in the back and trying to fix it. Luckily, it's just two fuses that have blown, which Chris finds replacements for. However, when he calls out to Anera, there is no response. As things start to get a bit more worrying, Chris walks back out into the cafe. To his horror, Anera is being pinned up against the wall by some mysterious creature. It looks like some phantom, and it attacks him and knocks him out. When Chris comes to, Anera is nowhere to be found, and the phone rings, to which he answers. The person on the other end can barely be heard, but they tell him not to go into the woods. Things have changed, however. The cafe now looks like it hasn't been open in years, and there is mysterious equipment set up on the tables. It looks like it was abandoned long ago, but this equipment is clearly high-tech. Confused as to what's going on, Chris decides to leave the cafe and explore the area. Ignoring the telephone's warning, Chris walks into the forest. He finds more high-tech equipment, including these towers, which appear to be emanating a dizzying hum. There are also these mushrooms growing around the area that glow, not something you'd typically find in a forest in Wales. As Chris trudges deeper into the woods, he comes across a bunker. This is where Chris encounters his first vision. The door is wide open, and a scientist in a hazmat suit is attempting to crawl out, clearly trying to escape from something. But when the vision ends, the door is now closed and the handle is missing. Chris decides to search the area to see if he can get inside the bunker. In a nearby house, Chris finds something disturbing. There is a pentagram on the floor and a dead scientist in the corner. This dead scientist also has these mushrooms growing over him that are glowing like the ones we saw earlier. The scientist has the door handle, but there's also a note which references the research that was going on here. For some reason, the scientists were scanning different radio frequencies, although it's not clear what they were searching for. The note also explains that this is a quarantine zone, although quarantine for what, we don't know yet. Chris heads back to the bunker and manages to get inside. There he sees Anera behind a locked gate.
Hey, wait!
He then overhears a radio. Somebody's asking for help.
Hello?
Oh, God, am I happy to hear your voice. I thought you guys had left me here for dead. Does this mean you got the all clear? I can leave.
The woman thinks that Chris is from the cleanup team, and he explains that he's not, and that he has no idea what's going on. He also explains that he was attacked by some dark creature. Helen explains that something bad has happened. She also explains that what he saw in the cafe was not real. She says that the things you see, no matter how real they may seem, they're just broken memories, figments of your imagination latched onto something real. She then explains that the only way for them to both get out of here is to reconnect 3 sites that have devices engineered to secure and contain the surrounding area. She tells Chris that he can find these sites with a displacement device. The Frequency Displacement Monitoring Device, or FDMD, was used by scientists in this area to detect something. Chris begins to use it and immediately picks up some form of signal. He follows this signal into a deeper area of the bunker. It brings him to a locked gate and induces another vision. This time he sees 2 researchers, both wearing hazmat suits. The 2 scientists are dragging something, and they say they're going to take them across the lake. We can see that they have the keys to this gate. They also talk about Isaac and say that something's wrong with him. He's acting a bit strange, and it's only started lately. Once the vision ends, mysteriously 2 oars appear that weren't there earlier. Chris uses these oars in a nearby boat to get across the lake. Once across the lake, Chris finds yet another dead scientist, who appears to have dug 3 graves. Chris takes the shovel and digs up the graves, finding the keys and another dead scientist in one of them. This area is known as Site C, or Ground Zero, and there is a crater in the middle of this area with equipment set up around it. There were more researchers here, set up in tents around the area. Using the displacement device once again, Chris starts looking for more visions. The scientists explain they are worried about Isaac, who has disappeared, and he was last seen heading over to this cottage. Chris heads inside the cottage and can see a vision of Isaac.
You see it. You see it now, don't you? Now it's up. The light between the rain and the earth.
He's talking about seeing things that other people can't, and the other researcher is very shocked that he's taken off his respirator. It's not clear how deadly this area is, but for whatever reason, all the other scientists are wearing these hazmat suits. Now that Isaac has taken off his mask, he appears to have gone absolutely crazy. What's worse is he takes one of the female researchers and locks her in the basement.
Hey, I'm tiny.
You're safe in here.
Safe from what?
The others.
While down here, Chris can see this drawing on the wall, which displays an X over in this area. He goes and investigates and can see that it's clearly been dug up, so using the shovel he found earlier, he digs it up again. There he finds a tape, which is needed to reactivate the site. Chris uses the petrol to power the generator and inserts the tape into this device. The device comes to life and starts emanating a very strange sound. But whatever the machine is doing, this area is now contained. Chris goes back and talks to Helen, who's very happy that Chris managed to get Site C back online. He now needs to do this to 2 more sites, so Chris heads back to the Last Stop Cafe. The equipment is almost ready to go, but is missing the battery and the tape. Chris uses the battery he found earlier, and then searches the surrounding area for another tape. He finds a crashed van, with more dead researchers inside. This time the vision shows a conversation between 2 different researchers. One's very worried about the containment breach, while the other one doesn't seem to care. While it's not clear what killed them, Chris finds another tape in the van. He inserts this tape in the second device containing the second site. The final site is in the village of Hearth. Chris makes his way into the village, which appears to have been quarantined. There are police cordons and vans all around the exits, and the town appears to be completely abandoned. Doors are boarded up, and there doesn't seem to be a single soul left in the village. The visions in this area show the police refusing to let people leave, but it's not clear where all these people have gone. Chris eventually stumbles across this hotel. He sees a vision of two scientists going in to set up the third and final device. Chris goes in to explore, but the power is out, and the breaker isn't working for some reason. What's worse, all the doors are locked, and he can't make his way into the room with the device. Chris does, however, find some bolt cutters, which he thinks might come in handy later. Following the visions using the displacement device, Chris makes his way back into the village. Following the signal, he has another vision of two men in a van. The two are talking about the containment breach. One's very worried, and the other one seems to be laughing it off. What they both don't realise, however, is that Isaac has poured petrol around the van and locked them in. He sets fire to the van while they're both inside. And as this vision ends, the van that wasn't there before suddenly appears. Chris uses the bolt cutters to open the van and gets the keys for the hotel from one of the dead scientists. He heads back to the hotel, manages to get into the room with the device, and finds the cassette tape inside, restoring the third and final device. Chris heads back to the bunker and gets in contact with Helen. Helen tells them that she's in the Echo facility and that he should make his way there, but midway through the conversation, the power to the bunker goes out. Chris makes his way to the Echo facility and uses the bolt cutters to get inside. Now that all three sites have been contained, access to the door has been granted. At this point, it's a good time to talk about Chris's father's journal. Reading it explains that a meteorite landed in the village of Hearth many years ago, and it started to cause strange things to happen, including these strange frequencies that the scientists have been monitoring. It's not entirely clear what they are, but Chris's father seems to think that they are echoes of people that have died, and that it could be possible to communicate with them. He also explains that some people who were born in this area after the meteorite landed had started to develop strange symptoms, including the ability to see these echoes that other people couldn't. This, combined with some of the notes around this area, start to fill in some of the blanks of the story. One of the research notes is from Chris's father. Here we learn that Anera was actually Chris's mother. One of the reasons why Chris's father was so adamant on his research was because he believed he would be able to contact Anera from beyond the grave. However, to do this, he needs a host, somebody who was born around this area, somebody with these strange symptoms. Chris descends into the basement of the facility. Here he finds rooms decorated for children, with children's toys and pictures on the walls. For some reason there were children in this research facility, yet none of them remain. There are also no research staff left either, just abandoned research equipment and more dead bodies. Chris finally comes face to face with Helen, in a large room with this giant machine in the centre. The machine has two seats that connect it to a part of the meteorite. One of the seats has a dead body and the other one is vacant. Helen tells Chris that he has to get in the seat and that's the only way the two can get out of here. Chris is skeptical, but he finally agrees to sit in the seat, which Helen calls a neural link. As soon as he sits in the chair, Chris is transported to this dark place. A place that has fragments of memories of the village and of researchers and things that we've seen throughout the game. As Chris makes his way through these memories, he finally comes face to face with his father, who only appears for a brief moment before disappearing again. Chris sees a vision of the same machine he just saw a minute ago. He decides to unplug the power and shuts off the machine. Chris then begins a monologue. He wakes up from the machine and his memories start to come back to him. He explains that he was one of the test subjects of his father. Because of his abilities, his father used him in his research in an attempt to contact his dead mother. He called Chris a host and was very cruel to him in his research. He put his research above everything else and showed no love or affection to Chris. All of this caused great psychological distress to Chris, and he had buried all of these memories in the deepest parts of his subconscious. Chris leaves the facility and, depending on the player choices, either drives away or catches a ride. What's really interesting is that we can see the village of Hearth, which no longer looks abandoned. There are people still here, casting doubt on what we saw earlier. It's possible that this entire thing was all in Chris's head. Fragments of memories from his past, not all of which were necessarily accurate. As Chris is driving away, he talks about how he's coming to terms with this past, accepting it and moving on. But he also explains that he experienced something pulling him back to this place, something calling him, which we assume to be the neural link that he's now severed. As the game ends, it's not entirely clear what was real and what wasn't, but the secret ending may shed some light on this. So that was the basic story of the game. The plot seems very simple, although there are multiple ways you could interpret this. Something very interesting about this game is that I don't fully believe what Chris saw was exactly what was happening. One of the reasons I believe this is as you were exploring the areas, particularly around the village of Hearth, you can hear things that don't make sense. This village is supposed to be abandoned, yet while walking through one of the streets I heard somebody sneeze. Inside the hotel, I heard a child coughing. And there are more sounds like this and also visions of people that seem to appear, casting doubt whether Hearth is even abandoned at all, especially considering that at the end it seems like there are people still in this village. So what's going on here? Is this all just part of Chris's fractured psyche? Did he imagine all of this? Is all of this just in his mind? Well, I don't think that's true either. There is a secret ending to this game, which is actually very difficult to get. To get this secret ending, you have to find this gun, which is just in the middle of nowhere, in a place that most people won't explore. You then have to find these 3 phantoms, one of which is incredibly difficult to spawn and only spawns once. If you manage to shoot them all, you then get access to this ghost terminal in the research labs. If you manage to do all of these things, once the game ends, you get an extra scene at the end of the credits. We don't know who this is, but this implies that there are other sites around the world, as this is clearly not in the village of Hearth, with it being far too cold. We know that the meteorite landed in Hearth, and that a full team of researchers were examining it. That, combined with the fact that Chris can see things that other people can't, and the fact that Isaac went crazy and started murdering people, seems to imply that the meteorite has had some form of effect on people. I don't think everything in this game was all in Chris's head, but I do think it was a mixture of the two. I think some things were a part of his fractured psyche, but I also think that this fractured psyche was a byproduct of Chris's abilities. None of this equipment would make sense if there wasn't at least some truth to Chris's father's research. We also don't fully know why Isaac went crazy. It could have been the long work hours, but it's more likely that the meteorite did do something to him. After all, there must be a reason why these scientists were wearing hazmat suits and respirators. They were clearly worried about some form of contamination, and that combined with the fact that these mushrooms are growing everywhere, to me implies that the meteorite was dangerous. So I think it's safe to say that what we saw here did go on. These scientists were murdered, Isaac did go crazy, and Chris did have some abilities that are not natural. I like to think this is the reason why Chris spoke to Anera in the beginning of the game. I think it's no coincidence that this girl and Chris's mother are both called Anera. In fact, I think this is Chris talking to his mother, although it's an echo of her. It's her when she was younger, when she used to work in this cafe. And although Chris doesn't realize it, he is talking to his mother from beyond the grave. And yes, it's true that could just be a memory, yet again, a product of his fractured psyche, but it's very real, it's very vivid. And I like to think that this is Chris using his abilities without him really knowing. If this is true, this would mean that Chris has the ability to talk to people from the past, talk to people that had died, which could lead nicely into a second game if we ever get one. So there we have it, the basics of the story explained and some of my own interpretations and theories as well. Like I said, I would recommend this game, it's pretty good, it's very short but it was worth it for me, and it's probably going to be worth it for you if you liked the PS1 era of games, as it felt very nostalgic to me. If you did enjoy this video, don't forget to give it a like and consider subscribing for more content just like this one. We explore, explain and expand upon the darkest worlds in video games here, and that includes theories as well. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.